It's a bit of a rainy, dreary day outside, so we're spending some time down in our basement grow room, getting some things ready for transplanting. We've already transplanted a bunch of things outside and started some new seeds, and so it's always a very busy time here in late April in the garden and with our grow room and getting things ready for the new season. Today I'd like to spend a little time talking about some different types of plants that are sold as annuals, but with a little bit of work can actually quite successfully be grown as perennials, which can create some excitement in your garden and save you a little bit of money and also be a fun little project. So traditional annuals that get sold and we grow a lot of in our garden from seed, you have something like impatiens. So here's a New Guinea impatient and grown from seed here in our grow room, soon about ready to be transplanted outside, and we do have another video where we talk about growing annuals from seed. Here as well, another very popular annual. This is a begonia, also grown from seed right here in our basement grow room. And just over here is a bunch more begonias. They're a little behind that one, but you can see them all growing up and getting ready for transplanting into pots pretty soon. But there's some other plants that, as I said, are often sold as annuals, but really can actually be perennials with just a little bit of work. So a couple we want to talk about today, dahlias. Here's two different types of dahlias that I've purchased myself at the local garden center. And you'll notice here that they are typically sold as annuals. But dahlias are really perennials with just a little bit of extra work, and I'll talk about what I do there. Another plant, these elephant ear plants. Again, this is a pack that I purchased a while back. And again, you'll notice it's sold here as an annual, but quite possibly can be a perennial with a little bit of work. And I'll also talk very briefly about mums. So let's talk about the dahlias first. Dahlias are a very popular flower for cutting in the garden, and typically sold at the garden center as an annual. Kind of pricey. I mean, you'll see I paid almost $15 for 5. So you know, as flowers from seeds and bulbs go, they're actually quite pricey. But the reality is that they will actually come back year after year if you just take care of them a bit and pull the tubers out of the ground before the hard frost hits in the fall. And so here in New York, we do tend to get fairly cold winters. And if I left the tubers in the ground all year round, they wouldn't survive and come back another year. But what I typically do is pull them out of the ground just before the frost in the fall. I store them in some peat moss in a cool location, not inside, because it does need to get some coolness or it won't necessarily come up again in the spring. But I actually put them underneath a closed-in area in our porch, so it gets cold, but the most important thing is it doesn't get below freezing for very long periods of time, and the soil, the media that it's in, does not freeze solid. I put it in some dry peat moss, so it gets cold, but it's not going to freeze solid. That's really important. If you left them in the ground and they froze solid, the tubers would pretty much be done for. And I take the tubers out, in this case around sort of late February, early March. Just put them in some soil and some potting mix. And down here in the grow room, typically on a heating pad, there's a heating pad on that one. And it's set for, looks like about 75 degrees Fahrenheit on that heating pad down there. And they'll all start to come up again. You'll see here, these ones were planted about a month and a half, 2 months ago. They can be a little bit slow to get started, but out of all those tubers that I saved, you'll see a whole bunch of different plants. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 at least out of those tubers that I put in the ground. And so I'll be able to take these out in a few weeks' time when it gets a little warmer and plant them outside. And there's lots of videos and other commentary you can find about you can actually propagate these. You could take cuttings from here and continue to propagate them. But we have a lot of these tubers in our cutting garden and for these dahlias. And so that provides us with a lot of really nice fresh cut flowers all season long. And so right there's one example of a plant which sold as an annual, but a little bit of effort, taking it up out of the ground in the fall, storing it over winter in a cool but not too cold location, and then regrowing them again in the spring will allow you to keep using those tubers over and over. And of course they will regenerate over time and multiply, so that initial purchase will continue to grow and serve you for many, many years. Another example of one of those annuals sold as annuals that can really be a perennial are these elephant ear plants. And so I basically do exactly the same thing here as we do with the dahlias. And here are the elephant ear bulbs, I guess they really are. And I perform the same procedure. I dig them up in the fall, put them in the same location with the dried peat moss in a cool but not freezing location. And then again, in the late winter, I'll put them into the potting mix and allow them to germinate. And you'll see here, this one is just getting ready to sprout up with its new growth. You'll see that here and here as well. The elephant ear bulbs can be quite large, ranging from maybe about the size of a lemon till some of these over here are really quite large, actually almost the size of a grapefruit. But bringing them indoors allows me to use them over and over again. You will sometimes find that they also multiply, and so you will tend to get more year after year if you keep doing this. And so you'll be able to grow the elephant ears over and over again year after year. Also, they tend to be very slow to get started if you just plant the bulbs outside, especially if you have cold winters as we do here. So starting them indoors also allows us to get a bit of a head start on the season and getting a lot of really nice foliage out of these for the whole season. So again, here's another example, something sold really as an annual, but a little bit of effort, you'll be able to turn those into a nice perennial for you. The last example, which we'll look at here, are mums. Now mums are interesting because sometimes you don't actually have to do anything. If you don't have if your winter's not too harsh, they'll just come up year after year. And even though they're often sold at the garden center as an annual, you basically can just leave them in place and they'll come up year after year and be a perennial for you. Another really nice thing about mums is that it's possible to grow them and propagate them from cuttings. And so a couple days ago, actually took some cuttings out of some mums that just came up this spring. So they survived the winter, they came up. I've taken some cuttings and I'm just in the process of actually propagating these mums from those cuttings. And I'll do another video later on showing that process in more detail. But again, one plant that you buy at the garden center in the fall, you can easily have that come back year after year and then propagate that into many, many, many more plants for future years. And you can also actually grow mums from seed. And so as a comparison, here we're actually starting some mums from seed, just starting to sprout up there, really quite tiny at this stage, but also possible to do that. So the dahlias, not really feasible to grow from seed, you really have to grow them from the tubers, and same thing there with the elephant ear plants. So I hope you found that useful, and definitely something you want to try in your own garden, especially with some of these plants like dahlias and others, where you can really save yourself a few bucks and turn these plants into something you can enjoy year after year, trade them with others, and really have a lot of fun with it. So hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you next time.